Let me tell you what happened, because I think every parent of a blended family needs to hear this. It started with what seemed like a small family disagreement about personality differences, but ended with a canceled Mother's Day celebration and a house divided. And honestly, I'm still not sure if he made the right call, even after all these years of watching families like his navigate these treacherous waters. This story isn't mine. It happened to my neighbor's son just last year. But sitting with him on my porch that difficult morning, watching a father struggle with the weight of his decision, I saw myself 30 years ago. Different circumstances, same impossible choice. Sometimes doing the right thing feels like the wrong thing in the moment. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when he came over, red-faced and angry, but mostly just hurt. "Frank," he said, "I need someone who's been through this to tell me if I just destroyed my marriage." That's when I knew this was going to be one of those conversations that would stay with me for months. Mike, that's my neighbor, had been a widower for 4 years when he met Janet. His boy Tom was just 9 then, quiet as a church mouse, the kind of kid who'd rather read in his room than join the neighborhood games. Mike thought Janet and her daughter Sarah would be good for them. Bring some life back into that house that had been too quiet since his first wife passed. For the most part, they blended well. Sarah, 16, was like her mother, outgoing, full of energy, always planning something. At first, Tom seemed to enjoy having a big sister figure. But as months turned to years, something shifted. The boys started retreating more, and Janet and Sarah took it as a personal challenge. "He just needs to open up," they'd say. "He's missing out on life." Mike found himself playing referee more often than he'd like. Tom would complain that they were forcing him to parties, family gatherings, trying to change who he was. I remember him telling me, "Dad, I just want them to understand I'm happy being quiet. Why can't they see that?" So Mike had to talk with his wife and stepdaughter, asked them to back off, let the boy be himself. They apologized, promised to respect Tom's space. Mike thought they'd finally found their rhythm as a family. That's when he decided to plan something special for Mother's Day, a surprise dinner at Tom's favorite restaurant, with Janet's whole family invited. But you know how it is with surprises in a house full of teenagers. Sarah couldn't keep her mouth shut, gave her mom the heads up. Still, Mike was excited, spent weeks planning every detail. He even got off work early that Tuesday to make final arrangements. That's when he walked into something he wasn't supposed to hear. Sometimes I think the worst family fights aren't the ones where everyone's yelling. They're the quiet ones, the whispered conversations behind closed doors that reveal what people really think when they believe no one's listening. Mike told me he could hear voices as soon as he put his key in the lock. Not arguing, just talking. His first instinct was to announce himself, but something made him pause. Maybe it was Janet's tone, or the way Tom's voice sounded smaller than usual. So he listened. "Tom, sweetheart," he heard Janet say, "why don't you ask your dad if he can stay home tomorrow? You know, for the Mother's Day dinner?" The boy was confused. "Why?" "I want to go. I want to celebrate with you." What happened next still makes my blood run cold when I think about it. Janet told him that his introverted and socially inept attitude would make her family uncomfortable, that he'd ruin the mood. Now, Mike had heard her say things before, but never with this edge, this calculation. Tom, bless his heart, tried to reassure her. "I promise I'll behave. I'll talk to everyone. I won't hide in the corner this time." The desperation in his voice. Mike said it reminded him of how the boy sounded after his mother died, trying so hard to be good, to not be a burden. But Janet wasn't having it. She brushed off his promises, said she wasn't buying it. And then came the words that changed everything. "Technically, I'm not your mom anyway, so I don't understand why you want to celebrate Mother's Day with me so badly." Mike said the house went silent after that. Even Sarah, who usually had something smart to say about everything, was quiet for a moment. Then she made some comment. Mike can't remember exactly what, but it was clear she agreed with her mother. That's when Mike stepped into the room. The look on their faces. He said it was like they'd been caught stealing money from his wallet. Tom's face was flushed, not with anger, but with that kind of hurt that makes you want to disappear. Sarah froze mid-laugh. And Janet? She just stared like a deer in headlights. Sometimes the truth we hear accidentally cuts deeper than any argument we could have planned for. Mike didn't yell. That's what surprised me most when he told me this story. In his younger days, he might have exploded, but at his age, he just felt a cold certainty wash over him. He sent the kids to their rooms. Tom's shoulders slumped like he was carrying the weight of the world, and Sarah left without her usual attitude. Then Mike looked at his wife and said 4 words, "The celebration is canceled." Janet tried everything, explaining, bargaining, even anger. "You don't understand," she said. "You only heard part of it. I didn't mean it that way." But Mike had heard enough. He'd heard the way she said technically. Like Tom was some technicality in their marriage, not a child who'd lost his mother and was trying to find his place. "What am I supposed to tell my family?" she demanded. "They're expecting us." I prepared. That's when something snapped in Mike. "Tell them whatever you want," he said. "But my son and I won't be there." Janet stormed through the house, slamming doors, throwing what Mike called tantrum after tantrum. She kept asking how he could do this to her, how he was ruining everything. Not once he noticed did she address what she'd said to Tom. Not once did she consider how her words had wounded the boy. By morning, she and Sarah had packed bags and left for her parents' house. No goodbye note, no text, no call. Just silence, which sometimes speaks louder than words. Mike sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by the Mother's Day decorations he'd bought, wondering if he'd just destroyed his marriage. But then he thought about Tom's face in that hallway, and how the boy had tried so hard to convince her that he'd be good enough to be included. "Frank," he said to me, "was I wrong? Was it too harsh?" I poured us both whiskey even though it was only noon. Some questions don't have easy answers. Looking back now, I've seen 3 families in our neighborhood go through similar crossroads in the past decade. Each handled it differently, and each family bears different scars or blessings from their choices. Mike's story reminded me why I always tell young parents. The hardest lessons in blended families aren't about money or space or holidays. They're about who gets to belong, and how we define that belonging. What Mike realized, sitting there with me on the porch, staring into his whiskey, was that he'd been so focused on keeping peace that he'd missed the signs of a deeper problem. Janet's words weren't spontaneous cruelty. They were the truth she'd been living with, just not saying out loud. Technically, "I'm not your mom." Those 5 words revealed more about their family dynamic than months of family dinners and birthday celebrations ever could. Tom never mentioned that conversation again, but Mike noticed changes. The boy helped more around the house, took on responsibilities without being asked. It was like he was trying to earn his place in their home all over again. That's when Mike knew he'd made the right choice, even if it felt terrible at the time. 3 weeks later, Janet called, not to apologize, but to explain. She wasn't ready to be a mother to a grieving boy. She thought thought her love for Mike would be enough, but she'd been faking it, and it was exhausting her. The honesty hurt, but it helped. They did reconcile, eventually, but first came months of counseling, hard conversations, and new boundaries. Tom got to decide how close he wanted Janet in his life. Some days that closeness looked like a stepmom, other days like a friendly adult in the house. They learned that family doesn't have to fit a mold to be real. I watched all this unfold from my porch, offering whiskey when needed, silence when requested. If there's one thing I've learned in 70 years, it's that protecting our children's hearts sometimes means temporarily breaking our own. Mike understood that the day he canceled a party to preserve a boy's dignity. And sometimes that's all a father can do. Today, 5 years later, Mike and Tom still live in that house. Janet is back, but their marriage looks different now. More honest, less perfect, but somehow stronger for having weathered that storm. Sarah visits less frequently, but when she does, she treats Tom with respect that wasn't there before. And Tom? He's 18 now, heading to college in the fall. Still quiet, but no longer shrinking from his place in the family. The Mother's Day celebration did happen, eventually, 8 months later, on Tom's terms. He planned it himself, invited both his birth mother's family and Janet's family. Janet cried when he handed her a card that said, "Thank you for learning to love me the way I needed." It wasn't pretty, this journey they took to get there, but it was real. What I've learned from watching families like theirs navigate these choppy waters is this. There's no manual for blended families, especially later in life. We come with histories, losses, and expectations that don't always align. The fairy tale of instant step-family harmony is just that, a fairy tale. But here's what I know after 7 decades on this earth. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is reject the easy lie and favor the hard truth. Mike could have pretended he didn't hear that conversation. Could have gone through with the celebration to keep the peace. But what message would that have sent to Tom? That his feelings don't matter? That he should accept being treated as a second-class member of his own family? I think about my own father, who remarried when I was 15. He spent years trying to force us all into one happy family photo. It took me until my 30s to feel truly seen by my stepmother. The difference? My father never stood up for my space the way Mike stood up for Tom's. As I sit here now, watching my own grandchildren navigate their complicated family trees, I tell them this. Your worth isn't measured by how well you fit into someone else's idea of family. True family finds room for all of you. The quiet parts, the different parts, the parts that don't match the picture everyone else has painted. Mike learned that lesson at 50. I learned it at 35. Some people never learn it at all. But when you do, when you choose the hard truth over the comfortable lie, you give your children something precious. Permission to be themselves and the knowledge that someone will always have their back. That's the kind of father and stepfather the world needs more of. Here's what keeps me up at night thinking about this story. Was Mike right to protect his son's heart at the cost of his marriage? Could Janet's words have been forgiven, explained away as stress? And Tom, 13 years old, trying so hard to be loved. How do you measure the damage of being told you're technically not family? After all these years, I've learned that the hardest thing about parenting isn't the big decisions. It's those split-second moments when you have to choose between your child's soul and keeping the peace. Mike chose his son that Tuesday. Was it the right choice? I still don't know, but I know it was the honest one. What would you have done? Share your thoughts below. Sometimes we need each other's stories to make sense of our own.